So, just on a final note here, because it is a rather thin news week. So I wrote about this today in the news update, but there's like a number of just different articles out there and just kind of looking at first the state of cable right now. Recently, I think it was a Sports Business Journal that first had these numbers out. But essentially, the number of homes that have cable has dropped almost 5% from this time last year to about 78.9 million homes. And USA Network is in about just over 74 million. TBS, TNT, about a million less than that, give or take. These are rough estimates. But the point being, less and less homes have cable, and we know where this trend is going. But this was, a significant jump down, and it's this interesting dance that you see associated. You hear it all the time with ESPN, that you have a lot of analysts in the industry, some that are very bullish on the idea of ESPN eventually going to a pure digital offering away from cable. And I just cannot fathom that it gets to a point like that with cable. But if it continues to just de-escalate, like at what point are these major cable networks looking at, the transmission fees that they're receiving and that this cash cow that is cable, when does it become diminishing returns? And that their belief that streaming is that the idea at least was that cable homes were going to migrate into streaming homes. But a lot of people got scared when that Netflix subscriber number came out in the summer. And you saw that Netflix, this never-ending arrow going up, suddenly it plateaued. And it freaked everyone out that, okay, there is a ceiling to this, and is streaming going to be the future? And then from there, it becomes sort of this recalculation of what are we valuing from these streaming homes. It's not just subscriber growth, but it's also like, what is the revenue you are deriving from all of these massive investments into these streaming companies, where you're seeing the amount of losses that are getting posted, like what Peacock is losing. It's just astronomical, but they're shielded by these companies that can certainly withstand these losses. But it becomes such an interesting question specific to this industry of professional wrestling, when you have the two leaders in North America gunning for their next television rights fees. And I would think by and large that I believe that WWE is going to be very secure in their next rights deal. I imagine an increase, if not a very healthy one. I think it's only going to matter how much of an increase they receive. AEW is one that, man, you could look at a lot of examples of what's going on with Warner Brothers Discovery, with a lot of cuts they're making, not just to executive, but also programming in the pipeline. The NBA contract that is coming up that you would think is paramount to Warner Brothers Discovery staying in this market of live sports with such a valuable contract with the NBA. And what does an AEW represent to them? Does it represent something that, yes, this has an audience, but this is something that, in a more rosier financial picture, sure, we would pick this up at a nice rate. But in this climate, we are trying to cut costs everywhere. Does this become something that is expendable given our financial realities? Or are they looking at it in the sense of, we've got to play Moneyball? What is valuable programming that we can get the most amount of eyeballs for that comes at a bargain basement price? Bargain basement is maybe hyperbolic, but very low as compared to other even second or third tier sports leagues. This is 52 weeks a year of programming with 3 hours of original content across our two networks that could be a streaming option, with an audience that will also spend money every couple of months on BR Live. And this could be a great value, even if we doubled their rights fees. And that's going to be the multi-million-dollar question. And if you are these promotions looking at, the one thing that's not going down is network television that SmackDown finds itself on. Like, that is, you are now looking at Fox being in almost 50 million more homes than the USA Network. Like, that tells you how valuable SmackDown is when it comes to reaching the most amount of people, and what it would take to move a SmackDown to a streamer or even to cable at that. Like, these are all the questions that are going to be surrounding what I predict will be the biggest story of 2023 is just these rights deals for WWE and AEW.
Yeah. I mean, at the end of the year, comparing to maybe how optimistic everybody was about both WWE and AEW, um, being up for renewal this in 2023, um, getting really optimal, I would say, value for those renegotiations. It tells you how quickly the landscape can change in a short amount of time. Um, I think a lot of it, I have to assume has to do with everybody tightening their budgets and cutting things that they're no longer using as often. And for some people, that's going to be cable TV. For some people, it's going to be a Netflix subscription. But I think looking at it, I feel like AEW, you could definitely still objectively say that it is an undervalued property. And for that reason, I don't think it necessarily hurts them. Maybe in some ways, they're a more attractive option for, somebody outside of Warner Media Discovery to, pick up. Doesn't necessarily maybe bode so well for maybe them getting Ring of Honor, or obviously, or like another kind of third tier if you're not WWE or AEW to somehow maybe get a look. But
Which
I
is
don't know.
interesting on the Ring of Honor front is, on the one hand, you look at it as this is a clear demonstration of the lack of demand that's out there. As you look further, I mean, what if you are Tony Khan and clearly he wanted this on TNT or TBS. He wanted it in this family, and clearly that was not an option for him to be able to exercise. Even if you got a modest deal elsewhere, if you believe that striking a deal with another broadcaster in any way would cause friction with your home broadcaster for your A brand, which let's make no disillusions, AEW, like that contract, that is the important one. And yes, Warner Brothers Discovery is not interested in this. Are they going to feel slighted even seeing like Tony Khan launching a wrestling program on another network? And this could at all jeopardize your Warner Brothers Discovery leverage, which if there is not a ton of people at the table, you're very much reliant on Warner Brothers, and the last thing you want is a side deal that somehow creates that friction when there's a lot of unknowns out there. That maybe this is the safe play of not aggressively shopping Ring of Honor elsewhere, but we park it at Honor Club and hopefully we can package it somewhere else once we are negotiating these AEW rights, or at a future date once we are secure in our future.
I guess I just can't necessarily see like what claim Warner Discovery would have, seeing how like WWE, even within their own brand, is able to split two separate deals across two different platforms, two different networks. Like, and I think to me this also calls into question exactly what sort of like agreement in terms of production Warner has with AEW. What sort of ownership do they have of like the TV? Um, I mean, Tony Khan technically has purchased Ring of Honor under a separate, under his own company, right? Rather than with AEW. And so I feel like that would open him, to be free to shop around. He's given Warner Media every chance to put this product on TV. And if they don't take it, I don't think he should necessarily be required to shelve it or just stuff it online.
Logically, of course, that all makes sense that, hey, you guys don't want it. I want to make this elsewhere. You just don't know what personalities you are dealing with. And suddenly we see a competitive wrestling show that's operated by this guy who is on our network, and we're not airing it here, but we also don't want to see it on someone else's network. Like, that's not fair. I'm just saying that if that causes any kind of friction, I would imagine that is probably a small probability of happening, and more so
if you're Tony though, wouldn't you want to shop Dynamite around anyway? Wouldn't you want there to, wouldn't you want another competitor to make an offer outside of Warner Media?
In theory, yes, absolutely. I think it would be his preference to stay where he is, but wants certainly like does not want just a reflection of this
deal. Them off either way.
It's very possible. Like, this is like you are dealing with significant heavyweights, and looking for transformative money for your promotion. Like, Tony is not out there to shop this so he gets the exact deal that he has now. Like, 44
yeah.
million a year is like, it's nice, but it's like that is not what this thing was launched to be making each year. When you look at like what they are spending, there's still a streaming deal to be had out there for them. Like a lot of, very interesting questions. And for the Ring of Honor part, like I certainly look at this landscape that it's not great news if you are non-WWE. We even have questions about AEW and what, like, Dynamite looks very secure. Rampage, you don't know. And for non-WWE, non-AEW, like I think a lot of these companies, they have clung to the idea of one day landing one of these big deals, and all these streamers are emerging, that there's got to be more money to go around. Pro wrestling is proven programming. I don't know. I see it as less likelier than any time in the recent number of years that any of these other like third or fourth level brands are going to get like a sizable increase in their distribution and be paid real money that is anywhere in this ballpark of what the two big promotions are receiving.
I think you're talking about oversaturation already, just even within like the hardcore fan base. So yeah, like I'd be curious to see how like the non AEW, non WWE tier promotions are able to navigate.
Just before we wrap this up, if you're going to play Nick Khan, okay, and I'm going to play your various executives that you're negotiating, and we'll talk strictly SmackDown because I'm curious about this. If you are looking at a deal, I'm just going to make the math easy for the numbers. If you are offered for SmackDown $200 million a year, which is roughly around what they're making now, $200 million a year, pretty much the same to stay on Fox. Okay, 123 million homes, 300 million to move to USA Network, 400 million to go onto Peacock or a similar streamer like an Amazon. Okay, yeah, so you're taking more money, but it is less eyes that you have access to. What do you think is most important, just looking at SmackDown?
Okay, well, obviously eyeballs, are very valuable for a company. Just because though Fox has a bigger platform, has it necessarily translated to more eyeballs actually watching SmackDown?
No, not appreciably. I mean, they do fine, but they're not gangbuster numbers they're doing on Friday nights.
So at that point, you're really just talking about the prestige of being on a network versus, I don't know what, like maybe not so much of a significant difference. I think the jump to like if that was USA and if we're talking 100,000 or sorry 100 million, I have no idea what conceptually that even means. Like that's such a big number. I don't know.
Well, it's 100 million more for, let's presume, a 5-year deal. So it means $500 million in additional revenue to lower, and you would think like the streamers would be going.
Can't picture visually what $100 million is, but I understand what you're saying, John. I mean, is the prestige of being on Fox like that much more valuable? Like are there other kind of like things that we aren't considering? Like I don't know. Like
I think there's a lot of value to being on over-the-air broadcast television in terms of the largest window to find the most amount of new fans, and that should always be very important, is creating new fans. And I would say going the streaming route, it's really hard. Like we are going in this era where it's like the idea. Like, I can't even remember the last time I've literally had my TV on and I'm flipping channels. Like, I don't even do that. It's like you're going into you have to know what you are trying to find. And I think that there's a big value with Fox just in terms of easy accessibility for people that do not have Amazon or do not have Peacock. And, similar to what we have seen, all these, like the NFL, like they made, and all these sports leagues, they have made, linear. Like they are very reticent to just go the streaming route, even though there would be lots of financial opportunities. F1, I mean, like they turned down more money to go to Netflix than it was to preserve a deal with ESPN. They took less money to have access on ESPN, knowing what comes with ESPN and the accessibility factor, as opposed to a guinea pig on Netflix for live sports.
Yeah, I think that's the more interesting question. Like, would they jump over to a streamer for more money? Like the move from Fox to USA at this point, I'm not necessarily sure if like it'll make that much significant difference for them, but like a jump to a strictly digital platform.
And
is
that's
a big one.
probably the comparisons you're weighing, unless, and I would think that if you are Peacock, it would just be the incentive of bringing everything under your umbrella, not having this, what is really the A show on a competing network, even though that competing network has no restrictions about promoting Peacock and sending people to Raw, that there is a hidden value there as well for NBC Universal having your product on another competitor.
Yeah. Like, I don't know if I make that jump if I'm WWE. I think, that like people still see something that's on actual TV as, especially if it's sports, as like maybe a bit more legitimate. I think, the landscape can change entirely if, let's say an NFL jumps exclusively to like some sort of like online, streaming platform, for instance. I think that'll change a whole lot. But for the time being on TV is, I think, very important and key to WWE's business.
Mm-hmm. And where Peacock is in 5 years is another big question, because these, the WWE network rights, those will come up as well. And then that will be like the next big deal for WWE to look out for. So anyway, this is kind of just setting the table for next year. It's going to be a big topic of conversation that you can also hear on WrestleNomics, as they did their predictions on Sunday with Chris and Brandon talking more about this subject as well.